What is up, everybody? We are back. Week 3 of college football. I'm Jeff. That's Mo Murphy from Up in Flames, both from the Off the Ball Network, and we're here to talk about Week 3 of college football. Mo Murphy, how you feeling, man?
I'm feeling great. I mean, we got a great weekend of college football. In my opinion, I think we got a great weekend of NFL football. I get
Oh
to
yeah.
enjoy a victory Monday 2 times. Both of my teams won. So, I thought it was going to be a very somber, like, as long as Ohio State wins, then I'm good and I'll be okay and sane throughout the football season. But we got a big win for us and, a solid victory for the Cowboys. Kind of pulled it out as nobody counted us to win the game, including myself. So yeah, it's a great weekend. Then we just got to see some great games, like period, college football, some things to take away. And then NFL included. Like since we are, recording this after NFL Sunday, like I do think, the NFL is it's the greatest time in the
It
world,
was
right?
yeah, it is. I had a good weekend too. Local high school team won. Buckeyes had a walkthrough base sorta. Let's talk more about that on Buckeye Remix. Played very well, let's put it that way. And then my Miami Dolphins stole a win from the Ravens yesterday, but and actually looked like the team, like the best, the best offense I've seen from the Dolphins since Marino. So yeah, exciting weekend, man. It was a lot of fun. So we'll talk about some things that are fun. We're going to talk about some things that aren't fun. So if you're new to the show, we kind of go through the biggest winners and biggest losers. It could be teams, it could be players, it could be whatever we think. It's not a breakdown of each game. It's what we learned, what we took away from what we think is the most important or the biggest games of the weekend. So I always start with Mo on this, and we'll lead it off with the best win. So Mo, who had your biggest wins, best wins of the weekend?
Oh, Penn State definitely. I think we got to put them in. First off, and it's obviously I hate the SEC. So anytime a Big Ten goes into SEC country and absolutely blows the doors
Yeah.
off of a team, I will always enjoy it. Sorry, Zach, that it was your Auburn Tigers that did it, but Penn State looked good. I mean, they look
And that's
solid.
2 years in a row.
Yeah, and then that freshman running back, he looks absolutely amazing. So I
Yeah.
got to give it to Penn State. On the slower side of the Big Ten, I got to give it also to Washington. I know you'll get into that as well, but I mean Washington beating Michigan State at home. I seen some. I wasn't able to really watch the game. I was watching Ohio State, but like, I seen clips of that crowd, and like I've been to a Washington game, so I understand like their atmosphere. Like they love their football teams. Like it doesn't matter how good or how bad. Like Washington loves the Huskies and they love the Seattle Seahawks. So with them
They
being right
sh-
down the street from
it,
each other, that's an environment.
and I agree with both those. I had them on there also just for, like you said, Penn State goes to Auburn. Like it's hard to explain. I'm not a Big Ten guy, but I do get offended by like the implication that us folks that live up here, in the Great Lakes area, just don't understand what real football is. We can't play it at that level, the speed difference, and on and on and on that we've heard, especially since the 2006 Florida beatdown of Ohio State. That's when it really kicked off, and we have not heard the end of it year after year after year. Every time the SEC wins a Citrus Bowl, it's a big deal. Every time, and I get it. The SEC has had a really good run, but Penn State, who is at best the third best team in the conference, what we think right now, went down there and curb stomped, one of the biggest brands in college football.
Yeah.
That they should be happy about that. It was a good win. As far as Washington, that's who I had as my biggest winner overall. Penix Jr. looked great in that game. He looked like he did 2 years ago with Indiana when they were riding his arm.
Mhm.
And what I have for my note is we've talked about it because of the preseason polls. Like you got to fight through that. This launched Washington into the conversation now. Like now they're good. Like they'll get ranked proper or not properly, but they'll get ranked in accordance to a potential playoff team that they are. All of a sudden, the Pac-10 looks really good. I mean, pretty top heavy, but good after well, I'll just go on to another winner I had, Oregon. Uh, Great, much needed win by Oregon after the embarrassment of by Georgia. They look good. They run all over BYU, who we heard all week. That was the team. They were underrated because they're an independent, and on and on and on. And that's a tough situation to be in. And then Oregon just blows your doors off, and now BYU's chances of a playoff are gone. So Washington, Oregon, now you got USC in the Pac-10. All of a sudden, it's a solid Pac-10, future Big Ten, which is
Yeah.
still weird. Well, not all of them, but in general. So Yeah, I agree that they're good winners. And another winner I had, I'll throw another one in there before, and then I'll let you get back. I thought Oklahoma was a winner as far as they got to blast Nebraska, an old time despised rival. Younger people probably don't really care, and I don't blame you because Nebraska's been hasn't been a rivalry for a while since Nebraska came to the Big Ten, but I remember it, so I know it means something to Oklahoma. Plus, I think it solidified Oklahoma as like we're a playoff contender. Like we're good across the board. Our quarterback looks good. Defense looks better. Like we're a contender. So I thought that was a great win for Oklahoma. So yeah, that was my 4 winners right there.
Yeah, I gotta. So A&M, I think just A&M real quick, bouncing back, beating a ranked team. How have you valued Miami? I mean, I essentially whatever, but A&M bouncing back, and I think Appalachian State winning that game the way they did for the viral moment for the world to see, to understand like this is the team that just beat A&M. I know they were playing Troy, so I understand, but like this was a big deal. Like Appalachian State, like wasn't game day. Game day was in
in Boone.
Boone. So
our friend Jeremy Barnes' hometown, Boone, North Carolina, showed up.
So this was a big deal for Appalachian State, and then that viral, obviously Hail Mary to win the game. Like I think the better App State goes on to play this year, if they're a 10-2, even 9-3, maybe like it doesn't make the A&M loss look as bad, especially when they turn right back around and physically dominate Miami. I mean, it was a low scoring game, kind of as expected, but they kind of physically dominated, got their get back at home. Now they have a quality win. I still think they're in the position where they have to win out, but still they have a quality win under their belt, and they
had to win. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, they at least get to keep fighting. Ole Miss, I think, looked amazing. I know they played Georgia Tech, but Ole Miss is a team, and I hate this because I have to give credit to Walker, but like Ole Miss is a team that I think the past 3 years, what they have actually been doing has to be applauded. Like, when are we going to have the conversation that, yes, we can hang on to what Lane Kiffin was in his younger days? Maybe he's just a great college football coach. Like,
they look good.
Yeah, like, is he Nick Saban? No. Is he Ryan Day? Probably not. Is he, is he up there of the top 3 upper echelon of college coaches? No, but like maybe Lane Kiffin is meant to coach a team like Ole Miss and take them somewhere. Like they look like a viable team. And like I said, I get it's against Georgia Tech, but if you look at their offense for the first 3 weeks, like their offense has been very productive, have done everything you need.
They run the ball more
years
now.
They've been doing that. Yeah, and they actually
people now, which shows like Kiffin adjusted his team. He's playing to his players' strengths. I was very impressed with. I got to go back and just watch some of the game. I won't pretend I watched the whole thing, but like what I saw was like, okay, this is a good physical team. I thought their defense looked pretty good last year. Their defense looks good again this year. They've got good athletes. They got guys that look the part and can do it. As some of these teams, like I don't care how well you coach them, it just sometimes it comes down to the Joes, and some teams just don't have them. Ole Miss looks like they can compete. They're not only can they have a really good season, they're gonna ruin somebody's season this year. I don't know exactly their schedule, but somebody's gonna get whooped by Ole Miss that didn't expect to. So yeah, that's actually a good one there.
Yeah, and then the Pac-12 real quick. Like, I just got to give the credit to the Pac. You said it, but
great weekend.
Remember, like week 1, you myself and like Walker. Like we had talked about, like they could get discredited after week 1 and we never talk about the Pac-12 again. And then 2 weeks later, they turn around and like the Pac-12 is respectable. Like Oregon got a quality win after getting smacked by Georgia. It's for one thing, I just want people to understand, like Oregon is a good team. Just because they got smacked by Georgia, like all that told us is they're not a playoff team. They can't play with Georgia.
At that moment, they're not. Yeah, they might be.
They're a good team, and they're going to win some good games. USC is looking impressive. I think USC is looking – they haven't played that key major game.
Yeah.
But they've played their 2 trap games, where Stanford typically is a trap game for them every year, and so is Fresno State. Those are teams that tend to play them really close. So I got to give USC for making it and blowing the doors through those trap games. And now they have another trap game at Oregon State this week, who they're only a touchdown favorite, which I am surprised, but I think this Oregon State team is better than everybody thought. So I got to get, like, the Pac-12 is now back alive with USC being undefeated, Oregon having a quality win, Washington being undefeated and having a quality win. Utah has bounced back up in the ranks. When you look, like, yeah, they're kind of top heavy, but those teams are ranked. And like, if USC makes it through that slate and beats all of them, like they're undefeated Pac-12 champs and easily are going to the playoffs. Absolutely. And will get kind of respected.
And what's important about that is, and this isn't an anti-SEC like take, I'm just using them as an example. I'll say the Big Ten too. They both the SEC and the Big Ten have each of them have two teams that people think could make the playoffs, in the same year. The Pac-12 being relevant puts kind of starts taking that away. Like if it gets down to the end, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, one of those teams loses that championship game, that Pac-12 is going to slide in there. They're going to be there to take that spot or already be ahead in the spot. So it does put pressure on the big two conferences so far too. So I like that about it. Yeah, Pac-12 is having a great year, and I just like to see it. It's football. It's on later at night. It just seems like it's always nighttime. Always looks good. It's a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it. So I totally agree. So on the other side of that, let's talk about some of the worst losses. Some of these are going to coincide. I'll start. One of your wins was Penn State, so I'll go ahead and start the Auburn conversation. You can't. You schedule this game. Everybody says I dare you to schedule these teams. In the spring and all this. They do. And Penn State goes down there. Stomps them. Like Auburn's left in shame. Like it's one of those losses to where like, what do we do? I don't know where we go forward as a program. It was that kind of loss. And it also is one of those things I recognize if Auburn wins that game like that, you're never going to hear the end of it. They would have jumped Auburn up to whatever. They'd have given them a chance against Alabama. So bad loss. I don't know where you go. It was just a tough loss and it's fine. Like sometimes you have those.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Like Auburn is one of my bad losses as well. I mean, you're a big time brand, and I get it. Like I was told, Auburn probably wasn't going to be that good this year, but
right.
Sitting there at 2-0 and still like you got to be viable. Like you had to look competitive. Like you got bullied and pushed around, and that's not something that you're used to saying about an SEC team, period. I don't care who they play, unless it's the upper echelon. Like you got bullied, pushed around by Bama. Like, okay, that's understandable. We know they have a plethora of guys that are going to the NFL, so it's a little more understandable. But like for Penn State to come in there and play bully ball and really just roll through at home, like that's a disappointing loss. And then, Michigan State, like I know we take Washington, but then like Michigan State, like the world is telling you they're ranked number 11. And you kind of just got wiped. Like, I mean, like you said, Penix Jr. looked like the Indiana Penix Jr.
He looked great.
Played a close game against Ohio State a couple years ago. Like he did look like that guy. And Washington looks like they got some players. And so like we talked about Utah and USC and Oregon coming into this season, but like I think we have a new Pac-12 contender in Washington. And do they build off of this, or do they do what teams like Penn State and Washington and some of those like Kentucky's who they have a quality win and then go blow it the next week, like those mid-tier in the high conference kind of guys, you know what I'm saying? Like they have that great win and then they just blow it the next week. Like, or do they build off of this and really understand that like what you showed on that field that day, like you could play in the Pac-12 and possibly win it. Like, I'm not saying now Washington goes undefeated. They don't have an easy road, but like they're real players in that conference now. And so now you have a different vibe around the team for the rest of the year. Practice is going to be different this week. Getting prepared for the game on Saturday is going to be different. Like it's just going to be different around Washington for the rest of the year as long as they hold up their end of the bargain.
And that's a terrible, on the loss side of it, like we're talking about Michigan State, that's a terrible loss because they needed that game. They've got Ohio State and they've got Michigan still on the schedule, and that's just left on that we know about. And that was going to be a game to where like, hey, we played a good team in Washington and we won. The ranking was obviously way off. There's no way that was the 11th best team in the country. Now they don't have a launch pad game. They dropped that, and then they have two of the best teams in the country coming up. Even if they split those two, they're a 2-loss team, and everybody's gonna be like, oh, they're really good, but they really lost all shot at especially in that their side of the Big Ten. Like maybe they got a shot, maybe they don't, but I don't. The path for them now to make the playoffs going into it, if you're ranked 11th, you got a path is very slim, and it was kind of a humiliating loss too. Like those sting a little worse when you get beat up like that. So yeah, bad loss by Michigan State. Another one I got on there as far as losers. And we're saying losers. It's in fun here. None of these kids are losers. I hope everybody's got common sense and realizes we're talking because they lost the game. BYU, and this one was this was one of those games because say what you want. I'm an Ohio State fan. I'm an elitist. I like the big programs to be good because I think they've earned it. I think they do a lot of the extra stuff that these other programs aren't willing to do to get them to a different level. And so I can't stand it when, the upstarts, or no, I shouldn't say upstart. BYU is a legendary program, but I mean like these less lower profile programs now in college football are always like, you're disrespecting us, and you're beating the drum about how good you really are, and give them a chance, and on and on and on, like Cincinnati last year. And then BYU gets blown out by Oregon. It was never close. And then it kind of justifies like, yeah, this is what we thought about you, and you kept telling us we were wrong, but we weren't. We were actually right about you. You're a good team, not as good as Oregon on that day. And as far as just like it, that really cripples their season. So BYU was a big loss.
Yeah, I think, to me, it's like it starts the conversation. One of my big losses, probably my biggest loss, to be honest, is the individual, Spencer
Okay.
Rattler. It's time to have a conversation that he's just not a guy. Like, he's just not. Like, he come in, 5-star quarterback. I think he was the best quarterback in the country. It didn't work out with Oklahoma. We've seen flashes. There comes a point in time where, like, flashes just, you eventually, if you're telling me you're a first-round quarterback or you're even an NFL caliber quarterback, those flashes come together at some point and you put together a good game.
He was considered the number one pick in the draft going into last season.
Yeah, like it was looking forward, like it was like a tank for Rattler, and then like it was Rattler and Stroud kind of conversation, like who could come out on top. It was a three-man race of three of the best quarterbacks we've seen. And then, like, if you look at his numbers, Saturday, 13 to 25, 118 yards and 2 interceptions. You think that's bad? This year, in 3 games, 721 yards, 50th in the country, 2 touchdowns, tied for 101st in the country, 5 interceptions, tied for 122nd, QBR 32.6. He is 108th in the country.
Isn't his head coach like a quarterback coach? Oh no, they got Beamer now, don't they?
Yeah, but like the problem is I don't want to bag on Rattler because I did have hope for him coming in to South Carolina. Like maybe he just needed fresh air without the pressure of Caleb Williams sitting behind you. Like when you're a 5-star guy not playing like the superstar we thought you were coming into college, and then you got this 5-star superstar who was on your stature the year before, like it's pressure. So I know it's a little different, but I didn't expect him to be absolutely amazing playing for South Carolina in the SEC. But like I can't look at your stat line through 3 games and everything is 100, 100, 100, 100 or plus. Like you are essentially one of the worst quarterbacks in college football right now. I hate to say it. I don't want to, but when you're 100 something in every category that matters.
And the easiest part of this game, well, I guess they played Georgia, but the first,
the first 2 games,
early in the years, you tend to pad stats.
Yeah, and you are you're 50th in yards. So I'll give you, okay, you're up there in yards. There's still 49 quarterbacks ahead of you. You got 2 touchdowns this year. You've played 2 gimme games so far. Okay, I don't care about scoring 7 points against Georgia. I expected that. Yeah, but you got 2 gimme games and you walk away with 2 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. It can't happen for a guy that even transferring to South Carolina. People still thought like he'll turn it around and he'll be an NFL quarterback, even if it's later in the first round.
Yeah, he's definitely. I don't think he's even
an NFL guy at all. I don't think he's he's an undrafted guy that maybe you hope somebody can finally unlock the talent 5 years down the line. Like he's just not an NFL guy to me.
Yeah, he's just not. It's not gonna. I watched a little bit of that game, because it was the first game the other day, and he didn't look like the same kid I saw at Oklahoma, and it never looked like potential. Like there was never for 1 second I'm like, oh, this guy, like compared to like, we're going to talk a little bit about the Ohio State game here in a minute, compared to like Toledo's quarterback, who like that guy jumped off of the screen as far as like they're going to get routed, but that is one of the best players on the field, and I mean that. Rattler didn't do that against Georgia. Like he didn't. He just, I don't know, man. You said it.
I hate to bag him, but it is like that's his predicament. Like you look at his stats, you look at his numbers, and it's like for everything. And I'm a guy who had hope, so like I'm disappointed that like he transferred to South Carolina.
If you listen to our preview show, like we were all high on Rattler. No, it's fair. It's kind of might be the end of the road, but hey, again, we always say he can have a wonderful life going forward. Not playing NFL football does not mean you're a failure in any way, shape, or form. But Yeah, at some point you gotta
Just to
look at.
drop from what you were, like
Yeah,
you said, last
you can't
season.
be like undersized and not good. Like you can't be both.
Like
That's a
it,
bad combination in the NFL.
like I don't even see the arm talent that I
Mm-mm.
once saw at Oklahoma. Like it's like I don't know if it's mental or whatever, but like I hope he turns it around and has a great 9 games
Oh yeah, me too.
season and is able to like maybe he's a fourth or
So
fifth round pick and we turn it around. But I don't feel like I'm watching an NFL quarterback. And it's not just Georgia. Like I'm not just weighing his performance against Georgia. I don't think a lot of quarterbacks play good against Georgia, but I think a
yeah,
lot of quarterbacks play better. Bo Nix played better against Georgia than Spencer Rattler did, and Bo Nix did not.
Bo Nix got housed.
Yeah, like and he still played. I still felt like there was a little bit of hope with Bo Nix that like maybe he's decent, maybe.
Yeah.
With Spencer Rattler, I just feel like it's got to be mental.
I
And
want him.
be done.
Okay. So here's a rule I want put into place. I gotta like. I'm gonna put this on my one of my takeaways. I want them to let Bo Nix play quarterback till he's like 35. He's not going to the NFL. Just let the guy keep playing. He's just fun. He's up and down. He's a roller coaster. He is a true like college quarterback. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like he does the part. He can win a big game. It's not, there's no like, oh, should he go pro? Like that part's done. Kind of like rap. Actually, he's probably going to work his way onto an NFL team because he's probably just one of these guys that you're like, you just bring on the team. Like he'll be ready to play football every day for the rest of his life and never
yeah.
really be great at it as far as a quarterback. I just need little Bo Nix. It just gets a pass. He can just keep playing. He's like Clifford over there in Penn State. He's going to be
Like
37 years old. He's going to retire from college football, but
he's like Tanner Morgan in Minnesota. I swear,
yeah, just keep playing.
he's
Just
ran
keep playing.
himself bald. Like he has ran himself
It's
bald.
crazy. We had a guy like that, but honestly, I think it was before you were born. Greg Fry played for Ohio State. I swear the guy played for 7 years at Ohio State. He was completely bald by the time he was done playing. Very average quarterback, but it was one of those like when you're a kid, time like feels slow. So
Yeah,
like imagine like I'm a kid. Greg Fry was a kid like half of my childhood. He's a
yeah.
quarterback half my childhood.
From
Yeah,
7 to
that's
14.
Bo Nix. Like if you're 7 years old, you don't know anything but Bo Nix.
Yeah, like he's been around. There's just certain guys that
I
just they
just
be
love him.
around.
I hope he plays his COVID year. Give me more. Oh, and I know you want to talk about Florida real quick. Your beloved Gators.
Oh, so here's why I say first off, I don't like putting betting in, but
That's
they were
fine. Go ahead, man.
they were 24-point favorites against USF. They were supposed to roll USF. They were supposed to bounce back and look strong against USF after losing to Kentucky, which is what a lot of people expected. I expected them to lose to Kentucky, but my voice held no water last week because I said they were going to lose to Utah, and that was just my hate for Florida, and they won. So now it's like, we don't care what you're talking about until like, all right, this is the Florida team we expected to see, and they struggled against
And what's
USF.
crazy is they should have lost to Utah and then
Yeah,
lost.
like they should have lost to Utah, but because they
But
won,
they didn't. They didn't.
yeah, they jump up to number 12, and now all of a sudden we overvalue them as an SEC team that had one good win, and now they could compete with the big dogs. They get humbled by Kentucky, and then I still think like you've seen all the holes. Like if you didn't see them in Kentucky because you're weighing it, like Kentucky's probably a really good team this year. Like I think we're valuing them as like they're a good team. They're not Georgia. They're not Bama.
Yeah.
They'll make it through most of the season. Where you're looking at Florida and you're like playing it tight against USF, like being down at one point, like in the second quarter and like having to fight for every inch to beat them by 31-28. Anthony
Yeah.
Richardson kind of still
He's
looking
got to
like
come back to the pack a little bit.
yeah, and it's his
I think
fourth
we
start.
might have got on the Richardson train. Might have left the station a tad early. He's a good player, but after week one, we invited him to New York. That might have been a knee jerk.
Also blame that on like Mel Kiper too for telling
Yeah.
us that he's going to go 12th in his mock draft as a quarterback, and everybody's coming in saying he's going to be a Heisman candidate. So like he didn't even ask for this kind of evaluation or these expectations, but
Fair.
as the experts did put him on there, that's where you're thinking. And when you're evaluating some of these guys, and like we understand not to do that, but still that's the light that he's looked at. And so for him, he's still a good player. Like you say, he's still a good player.
Yeah.
I still think he's another year away from going to the
Yeah.
NFL. I think he's going to need to return next year. But at the same time, it's just like to go at home and do that against USF, like that just you skated by, and I'm not sure that like how can I value that as something great?
And a lot of that comes from us. Like we're both, huge Ohio State fans, and we know like you got to base a lot on expectations. It's easy to go through the scores, Florida won and move on, but we know is like what you need your team to look like when we play. Like we knew last year when Ohio State beat Tulsa that that was terrible, and we knew that there was trouble. It's the same thing with you're saying with Florida. Like, yes, you won, but you can't be blind. Like when you watch the tape, it's going to look bad, and you've come back to the pack. So I don't think that's unfair. So that does lead me to my first great question. You kind of oops, sorry about that. Lost a banner. Oh, I like that. So let's get rid of worse losses here. I need a producer, Mo. I'm not gonna lie to you.
I be doing that all the time.
But the question is, because you've brought up this a few times today. You've talked about these teams that are like they're good. We're just good teams. Like we can't say they can win a playoff game yet, but they can also beat any team. You're talking about Kentucky. We're going to put Washington in there right now because we don't know much more. As an example, Oregon's a good team. Florida wants to be a good team. There's several of these teams out there. And I saw somebody put it this week when they were talking about the top 25. They said this one person said that it was Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, of course, and Michigan were the top four. But then he said there's a huge gap to everybody else. And I said, I don't think that's true because I watched Ohio State, play Notre Dame tough. I watched Alabama go to the wire with Texas. Georgia has not stumbled at all. So, but what I guess my point is at Michigan, they've looked fantastic against admittedly weak opponents. But I said, I don't see the gap because I saw Texas should have beat Alabama. I saw Notre Dame that a couple of accidents, they could play with Ohio State. And I ask you, like, do you think there's a gap that we've been talking about? It was Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia all summer. Mm-hmm. That was those three in a gap. Do you see a gap?
No, not as big as I thought it would be, to be honest. Like, and I was one of those guys, like, we were talking about why was Clemson ranked number 4 going into the season. And, it was like you, me, I know I was saying it, and Zach, it was like, it doesn't matter. Put anybody at 4. Nobody cares. Like, that's why they put Clemson at 4, because nobody cares who the 4th team is. And like, I don't know what the expectation, I don't really care about what the expectation was for Michigan. Like, I know we needed to beat them, and that's all that mattered. I don't care if they went undefeated or not. Like, we need to beat them, so it doesn't matter what they do. Good for them if they're great, but just don't be greater than us. But like Michigan looks like a team, but I got to see strong. But they're handling business. They're doing something.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They're doing business against teams they need to handle business against.
But just so, I would say, like, I mean, if USC and Michigan play tomorrow, I don't know who wins. Or if USC and Ohio State play, I mean, any of these top 4 teams, like Georgia obviously has looked the best. They've beat a couple decent opponents and just mashed them. There's been no look back. But I also know, like, well, if you can't tell me that one team is that much better. I don't think there's a gap that people do. I never really did. I thought Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State, very talented teams. But I don't, people still talking about this gap, and I'm like, I don't know, Clemson's pretty good. And I just want to point this out there. I had Clemson, I think I had them as number 4 in my opening rankings. By the way, after week 4, Jeff's Neat Sports playoff rankings will be coming out. I wanted to wait till after conference schedule started. There was no reason to jumble the rankings through. Most of these games have been, dumpster fires. But I Clemson at 4, and it's turned out like when you look at their schedule, like I don't see the loss for Clemson on their schedule. So like they are, as of now, I consider them a playoff team. DJ's playing good, but that's just one example of like that gap's not there. I don't see them getting in the playoffs and getting their doors blown off like everybody said. I don't see how you could watch the ups. I don't see how you can see App State beat A&M and then tell me that nobody can beat the top 3 teams or the top 4 teams, whatever you want to put it at now. I don't think that's true at all.
Yeah, I don't think it's there the way everybody expected it to be. And I don't get how you watch the past 3 weeks and then tell me that gap is still there. Like, is Ohio State like coming into their own right now? And like, could we have a different conversation that they're head over heels better than almost everybody not named Georgia, Alabama, or Michigan? Yeah, we could. But right now, like, I think Ohio State could get got. And especially when you're saying after the top 4 teams, it's a huge gap. Like, I'm not going to discredit Oklahoma like that. I'm not going to discredit
exactly.
USC like that's right. I'm not going to discredit Kentucky like that. Like, they got a strong win under their belt. Like, so there's certain teams like, do I think Kentucky beats Ohio State today? No, I don't. But do I think the gap is so big that I'd have to walk away surprised if it was a closer game than anybody thought? Like if Ohio State plays Kentucky today, they're 14.5-point favorites, probably guaranteed, even on a neutral site. At home, they're 17.5. Would I be surprised if Kentucky covered? No, I wouldn't. Like, do I think they're a good enough team where they could play them close? Like you said, we saw Notre Dame in week 1 play them close, and look how we view Notre Dame right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's just one of those, like, I don't think the gap is as big, especially when you tell me, like, the 4 best teams are Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, and Michigan, which I think pretty much everybody agrees with what they've seen so far. I think people question Alabama a little more than anybody else because of that hiccup where they should have lost to Texas. But outside of that, like, you're not gonna tell me that Clemson, USC, and Oklahoma and Kentucky can't play with none of those teams.
Yeah, there's no way you can tell me
is the standard right now. Then okay, but like if you're telling me they can't play with none of those 4 teams, like I'd be surprised. Georgia is the standard right now, and they do look like a team that's trying to go back to back, and they look like they have the strongest case right now. But the gap between the top 4 and then 5, 6, 7, and 8 is not. It's not. That's right now.
Yeah, there's just no way. And that's another one of those things. There are people that are against the playoff expansion. They're like, oh, it doesn't matter who plays. I'm like, it does. Like there's a lot of good teams. There's going to be upsets. One of these 4 teams that we're talking about is going to get beat because Ohio State and Michigan play. So you can't tell me there's Georgia and Alabama eventually have to play. So you can't tell me that there's a huge gap when 2 of them we're going to have 2 of these teams are going to have a loss. So what's the huge gap? Like we can't put them all 4 in, after the conference championship games if it works out that way. So yeah, I think I agree with that. I think it's too early, and I think it's sort of disrespectful to college football. Like I can't watch Ole Miss play and say that the gap is that big. Like that's a good team. Just that's an example that we talked about earlier. And then so I got a quick OSU question. This came in from a listener, listens to us all the time. It's my buddy. We used to be on the show together on Tuesday Aftermath, Max. He actually called me up in person, and he specifically said, I got a question for Mo Murphy. And he had a few questions. Some of them were more funnier than others. He's a huge Buckeye fan, but he's a huge football fan too. So he sees the game within the game. He's actually a really great football mind. So his realistic question was, when you're watching this OSU offense, we're seeing him score all the points. Stroud we talked about it. Stroud is the most NFL ready quarterback, in college football. There's no discussion about it. As far as an NFL team, if you look at what he's doing with his feet and his eyes and the windows he's thrown in, ready for the NFL tomorrow. Different question than, a college quarterback. Bryce Young would have an argument. But anyway, he's wondering is Ryan Day has basically abandoned like the RPO, the option game, all that stuff that they ran, with Fields and, go back to JT Barrett and all this. But he's wondering, the question is that detriment to Ohio State's offense? Is it actually limited a little bit? Because what his argument is, the defensive backs just aren't worried about turning their back on the quarterback, that, that fear of him taking off, behind you and gouging yards. So Mo Murphy, huge Ohio State fan, huge football fan. You watch the game. Is Ohio State's lack of a quarterback running potential? They don't even have to really run it. Potential is that actually slowing down what this great offense is?
So Jeff, I don't know if you remember we had this conversation last year.
Yeah,
remember I said that.
I know how. I know. Yeah, I know this is this year though with this with this version of Stroud.
We did have that conversation last year, and I did feel that way. But I look at it this year, and I'm like, this is a guy who last year we had some questions, not whether Stroud was going to be great, just was he great at that moment? Like, was he going to lead us to play for a national championship? I think he's there now. And I'm looking at the throws he makes, and what Ohio State did is they abandoned the RPO, and then they put 7 talented wide receivers on the field where it doesn't matter if the defensive backs have to turn their back on these wide receivers. Look at the throws he makes. He puts them in the tightest of windows, and they have the capability. They have the receivers capable of making those insane catches where it's a tough throw and tough catch, and it takes elite play from quarterback and receiver to be able to do it. And so I think, like, I was a little skeptical about, like, man, I think we need the threat of his legs, like how we had Justin Fields and Barrett. But I don't want to say this. I hate doing this, but Stroud might be the best thrower of the football from the pocket that Ohio State has had.
It sure looks like it right now.
Fields was great. So that's the measurement stick. I think Fields was the best all around quarterback we've had.
Yeah.
And Haskins had a great year, but I still think like when I'm looking at, he can make every throw on the field. Like if you watch the Toledo game, like 95% of the quarterbacks, and you'll know what play because you watched the game, but 95% of the quarterbacks, you remember when he dumped it right over that linebacker, like right out of his hand reach when he jumped up for it? Like that's an interception by 95% of the quarterbacks. But it wasn't for CJ Stroud. And the other guys I give the benefit of the doubt is like Bryce Young probably doesn't throw that as a pick. Will Levis probably doesn't throw that as an interception. But 95% of NCAA football quarterbacks, that's a pick going the other way and possibly a pick six. Like, so I think when you get a guy who can literally make every throw that you ask him to make, whether it's that, and then you have weapons. JSN wasn't healthy. He had two catches for 20-some yards, and we still end up having superstar receivers. Julian Fleming finds the end zone twice. So I think we just revamped the offense where we don't need that RPO option. We're too deep at running back. We're really like 4 deep at running back, but we have a 2-back system where we can run it any type of way. We don't need that threat of CJ Stroud running the ball. Like I really believe we don't right now.
That's fair. There you go, Max. There's your answer. I know he feels different, and I see both sides of it. I see what he's saying, because when your quarterback doesn't have a run threat, then you're basically giving them an extra defender in the secondary. But I also agree with you with the way Stroud's throwing it, and the less hits, the better. I still think that he could steal some. I think the best option would be just every now and then when it's open, just steal 10 yards just to keep him awake. I wish he would do that a little more. He may. I don't know that he won't. But then when I went back and rewatched that offense, it was almost perfect in that first half. I was, a little hard on him at first because of the score, but when I just watched it as an offense, that first half was just unbelievable. And they don't need it right now. It may be in there. Maybe it will be in there. We have no idea when they'll unleash it. Or maybe there's a wildcat option, with all the athletes they got out there. Maybe, a Deebo Samuel or, type situation like they got in San Francisco, to where it's not your quarterback getting hurt, but when you get down to the goal line, it gives you some options.
If I had to guess, it'd be a Mecca Ibuka if we did do that.
Yeah, me too. Something like that. So that's probably going to be in the future. I mean, I'm going to give Day credit. So far, he seems smarter than me. So I think he's got it under control. I'd like to see Stroud steal yards, but I don't necessarily know that I need the RPO back just yet. And maybe Stroud's just not that guy. Like maybe they've tried to work it in and he's just not an RPO guy and they've abandoned it. We don't know that. So
they asked him about it last year, and he said if I came to play running back, I'd play running back. Like,
yeah, but he got a reactionary on that, because also, like, when you're rolling out of the pocket, there's 12 empty yards in front of you, and you're throwing it in these tiny, tight windows. I understand that's what you do, but go ahead and take what the defense. Like Max said, watch even Josh Allen, the best quarterback in the league, he still steals like 15 yards every now and then. Like,
yeah.
But I know Stroud was being defensive of himself and his skill set. I don't blame him for what he said, but I also think it was more of like he felt a little insulted than anything else, and that's fine. I have no idea.
Athletic enough. Like
I kind of like that fire that he showed in that. That's what I took away from that when he said that. I'm like, he basically, like, he's a really soft-spoken kid, but I think he was kind of like "F you" is what he wanted to say.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm good with that. I'm good with that. So we'll move on. So we're going to start with our overall takeaways real quick from the weekend. What did we learn is what I called it on here. I'll go first real quick because it hit me late. And then I finally, I'm like, what did I learn? Because I try to really think about the overall. Here's what I learned. College football has to speed up the game. This is getting crazy. These games now with all the passing, with the clock stopping every first down, almost every play that good teams runs a first down. So the clock stops every a play takes 7 seconds. So every 7 seconds, it's, it seems like it's stopping. The games are taking forever. The defenses are just on the field all game because they're just constantly coming back on the field because nobody runs any time off the clock. They run a lot of plays, but no time runs off the clock. Just as a viewer, you tune in, you're like, my goodness, it's only the beginning of the fourth quarter in some of these. I think the best option is maybe go back to first downs don't stop the clock until maybe a certain point in the game or a certain point in the half or something like that. Maybe you give them, a few more seconds on the clock. I don't know, but just my overall takeaway is this is getting ridiculous. I love watching these games, but I tune in. The next set of games is supposed to start, and the one before it's in the end of the third quarter, and it's 45-37. It's like, yes, give up some scoring. I watch the NFL and I look at the tension and I look at the like there's so much importance because that clock is just ticking, ticking,
Mhm.
ticking, ticking. I think college football, I know they tried it once. I was there when they tried it. I mean, I remember the '06 Buckeyes famously ran out the clock on Michigan because it didn't stop on a first down, and it was weird to see. But we got to figure out something. It's just out of hand.
Yeah, I
Uh,
do hate like I agree with you on that. I do hate that I look and it's like 3:30 and I'm watching midway through the fourth quarter and all these other games have kicked off and I'm still tuning into this game if it's obviously a game worth
yeah,
watching. Something I learned this week is I don't know. I just feel like each week I'm like, there's a lot of good college football teams. Like, this is a great college football season. Like, when
yes,
it's all said and done, the playoffs are going to be the playoffs, but like, there are matchups that have been great. Like, we have gotten some great games. Like, it's not all the elite teams are blowing out all the bad teams. And then I think the way they've scheduled it, they've scheduled enough good games each week that's worth tuning in for, but not they didn't schedule too much where it damages too many teams'
yeah.
seasons moving forward. So that's what I do like. Is like there was 5 to 6 quality games worth watching this weekend, but
And it was a bad weekend. It was the worst schedule of the season.
yeah, and that was what people were complaining about. And I'm like, these turned out to be really good
Yep.
games. I said, and how many team seasons are over after this past week? Like BYU, that's
Yeah.
pretty much it. Like everybody gave themselves fighting shots. I mean, you could say Miami season could be over, but if they went out and they're 11-1 ACC champs, like I'm just saying, you never
No,
know.
no, that's true.
Like nobody important took that second
I
loss.
think the only two teams that are buried are BYU and Notre Dame because they don't have a conference championship game.
Yeah, like
I
I mean,
think I think they're done because of it.
Michigan State won't run the table, but like projecting that it's a possibility, they could be 11-1 Big Ten champs. Like they're
We
still
haven't
not.
even talked. You know who somebody we haven't talked about is Oklahoma State. they're
Yeah, like what are they? Aren't they undefeated still?
yeah, they're good. I think they're up to like top 10 this week.
Yeah. So and that was one of your teams that was in that top 8 initially, but
That
it's
was
just
before I saw
there's
Oklahoma
a lot
play.
of
I'm
yeah, that's true.
I'm
But there's
nervous.
a lot of good teams. To me, there's a lot of good teams and there's a lot of good games. And
I
even this
agree.
coming weekend, like there's some matchups I'm going to sit down and watch, including ours.
Oh, go
Like
ahead. Let's just go right. Let's go right into matchups, man.
Florida and Tennessee might be
That's
the one
awesome.
I'm most excited to watch. I think my mom's from Tennessee, so she's a big Tennessee
Oh, that's
Vols fan.
cool.
Yeah, she's a big Vols fan. So like I grew up all her side of the family, like they're all from Tennessee. I grew up around that Vols.
That seems like a good. I'll ask you real quick since you know. That seems like I always kind of like was partial to them, like growing up. As far as like, man, they just seem fun. Like you know, you have other teams. Like I was always a Buckeye, of course, and then you just have other teams. Tennessee, I always really like good fans.
Oh,
Yeah,
they love their Vols, first
awesome.
off. Like I've been to, I've gone to visit back in Tennessee. Like I used to go every year. So like they love their Vols. It's Tennessee everywhere. Like my
Another
mom's
one of our good teams.
Tennessee. Yeah, my mom's like in a small town in Tennessee, but it's like if you go in Columbus, like it's Buckeyes everywhere. Like you go in Walmart and can buy Buckeyes gear. Like
Yeah,
it's like that out there in Tennessee. But so
that's cool.
we usually watch that game together every year. Like as long as they're not playing at the same time as Ohio State, like that's a game. Like she'll come over and watch or whatever. So I'll definitely be tuning into that at the 3:30 game.
That's a great
2:30 my
game.
time. But then
That's a
you got
good
like
looking game too, by the way.
yeah, just that
The
blue, and
colors, the
orange,
blue, the
and
orange, the
white. Like
field.
I wish it was a night game. But Ohio
It is a
State
better.
is at night. Like so, no, not this week. But
I should be. I'm hoping to be at the Ohio State game this week. I've almost clicked. I've the tickets I tried to buy today kind of got bought out from under me. So as of now, I will be in attendance this week. Ohio State versus Wisconsin.
yeah, like there's some big games like Arkansas plays A&M. Like A&M just had a bounce back win. Arkansas struggled a little more than we thought against Missouri State.
And this is an elimination game. Whoever loses, like we basically don't care about anymore.
Especially if A&M loses, because that'll be their second loss, and then
Yeah.
they'll have a loss to App State, obviously, and then Arkansas. So like A&M season could essentially end as far as real importance for the rest of the season. But yeah, that Florida Tennessee, I think that Clemson Wake Forest, like I'm interested to see.
I
Like
had it on my list too.
them close. Like I mean, they're going into the game as 7.5-point dogs, but like, can they play that close? People think it'll be close. They got their Sam Hartman, they got their quarterback back, and I think Wake Forest can put up a lot of points. They looked a little shaky this past week, but
And we've talked. I'll take the other side of that. The Clemson side is why I had it circled. Like we talked about all these good teams so far. You just mentioned another one. Whoever, whoever wins the Tennessee Florida game is going to be put themselves there at good team. Kentucky, USC, all these teams. Clemson can't afford to slip up in a we'll say one of the probably the fourth weakest conference right now. It's definitely the fourth weakest.
Yeah,
So they can't afford to slip up.
yeah.
So they have to play. Actually, it might be fifth. It's probably fifth in conferences right now. So Clemson can't slip up because it's going to be hard to gain that ground back against, a Pac-12 team or one of the Big 12 teams or something. So I think it's an important game for Clemson to show that they're legit. Just
You
like,
know, surprisingly have 5 teams ranked. The
yeah, I
ACC
know,
has 5.
but I
Yeah,
still think
Miami,
all said and done, it's going to look that or the Big 12 obviously is going to look like
yeah,
the
it's gonna
weakest
look
conference.
different later on because also 3 of those teams are like in the late teens and
Yeah,
20s.
yeah, you got Miami, who I don't think can hang around the top 25.
Yeah.
Wake Forest I don't think Wake Forest is going to win, so that's going to drop them out. You know what I mean? North Carolina State, we'll see, but Clemson's got a Notre Dame. It's going to be a big name on their schedule coming up. But I just think Clemson needs to just look good. They don't have to blow them out or anything. Just look
No, they
solid,
just gotta win the
and
game.
everybody will be like, okay, Clemson's fine. Like they're back in contention because I really think that this year the playoff spots are going to be hotly debated more than usual. I do not think that two teams from one conference are getting in this year. I'm standing by it. I don't think it can happen because you've said it all show long how many good teams there are. There's no way that you can tell me that two of them can come out that just play each other. Two of these teams. So I really think that every team, needs to take care of their business and put themselves in contention. So that game, and of course, OSU, Wisconsin for the exact same reason. Ohio State, blew the doors off a Toledo team that some people say are good, some people don't care. Wisconsin's a good team. They had a bad loss, but their defense, their Jim Leonard defense can be really good. Their offense, if it's running right, can be good. And so it's a nice solid test for Ohio State. Stroud's finally going to get some pressure on him. He's going to get knocked around a little bit. The receivers are going to get pushed around a little bit. And Wisconsin's going to try to be physical and see if they can take it. It's going to be a nice physical test for Ohio State to see if there is that gap or if they've still got work to do.
Yeah, and that Wisconsin loss come the end of Saturday could not look as bad because if they lost to Washington State. Washington State's 3-0 and plays a ranked Oregon team. If they win that game, they're 4-0. And now you look, if Wisconsin loses to Ohio State, which we both expect, then they have two. I would imagine Washington State would jump into that rankings even if they're in the 20s. So now they're 2 losses against ranked opponents. One that's in the 20s now, and then obviously the number 2 team or number 3 team in the country. So that loss against Washington State may not age as bad if Washington State was able to pull the upset over Oregon.
Yeah, the whole focus on whole focus on the Ohio State game is, do they get physically pushed around? Because if they do, that's when the worries start, because that's what happened last year. They got pushed around by, physical teams. So if Wisconsin comes in there, even in a win, but if they push Ohio State around and get Stroud on his back, then everybody's going to look at this Michigan team and be like, oh, here we go again. So I think it's a really important game for Wisconsin or Ohio State to like look more physical, just tougher, ready for the game, all the above. Like it's on their shoulders to go back and forth with Wisconsin and look like the tougher team, which who knows? I've seen some good battles with those two over the years. So looking forward to it. I hope I'm there. Look for me. I'll be wearing black. I think everybody's wearing black.
Now everybody's wearing black. They need to bring back the black jerseys on Fanatics. I'm waiting for them to release. What are we doing here?
So, I did that one year. We went to the Penn State blackout one year, and we sat in we not on purpose, but our tickets were in like the predominantly Penn State section. So you look out there and you can still see it on pictures to this day. There's a all white section, and there's us, me and my wife wearing you can see you can see 2 black dots right in the middle of it. It was really cool. To this day, if you see the pictures, you can still pick us out of the lineup. Penn State fans, by the way, were really cool that night. No problem. Watched Saquon Barkley, knew he was a superstar. I think he was a freshman. It was a fun game, but all their fans were super cool. So I always like to throw that out there because I had a lot of bad experiences with fans. That was a good one. We had a good time watching the game with the rival fans, and there was no problems, and we acted like adults. We've lost some of that over the last 4 or 5 years, but
Yeah.
we'll see how this one goes. Also, the last time I watched them play Wisconsin, almost either got beat up or thrown in jail or whatever. Things got a little carried away. But I don't know, man. It's just, a guy taps you in the small of the back and tells you to just go through a door. Something was wrong about it. I was like, well, who you go? You walk through the door. I walk through the door when I want to walk through the door. It got carried away. It got really carried away.
And then that alcohol talks different.
I don't know what you're talking about, Mo. Nothing to do with it. Anyway, that's it for the show. Mo, thanks a lot for doing this. We just recorded this. Mo, you just did a show with Jay, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, we talked about had to talk about a rough topic in the Robert Sarver saga and scandal, I guess you would call it, and kind of just our thoughts on that. But then, to be able to turn around, talk about a serious topic, and then turn around and be able to talk college football with you, which is what we've done every week at this point, is always great. Have two different type of conversations, but still have good conversations with two of the best in the business, honestly, between you and Jake.
Yeah, that's why we invite you on, man. You make us better, that's for sure. So yeah, go check out the Jay Stevens, all the work he does. Jay Stevens podcast, Locked On Buckeyes. You catch Mo in there, and our president Chris LeBron just ran an awesome show. The Overreaction Monday was back, so go check that on the YouTube channel, the Off-Ball Network YouTube channel. It was really cool, nice format. I jumped on there for a little bit. It was a lot of fun, so keep up with that. And then appreciate everybody, listen, like, review, everything you do for us. It's been a blast. So for Mo Murphy, for Jeff Hunt, we're out of here. We'll see you next week, and we have no idea what's going to happen, and that's what we love about college football. Have a great week, all.